We have a great lineup of speakers for tonight's rally, and I'm going to introduce them one by one as they go up. But I'd like to start with our first speaker. I'm absolutely honoured to introduce Marcia Rig. Marcia Rig is the sister of Sean Rigg, who was murdered in 2008 by the police while in custody. And Marcia has been fighting for justice for her brother ever since. And so I'd like everyone to give a very, very big round of applause and a big welcome to Marcia Rig.
Wow, thank you. I'm a bit taken back. Thank you very much for your hospitality and your welcoming. I'm only going to say something fairly short to open it, this panel here. And if you was in the last meeting that I just spoke at, you would have heard it. But I think I'm going to say it again at a wider audience. And I think it is fitting. It is a speech. I'm going to have to take off my glasses so I can read it, but I can't see you all. It is a speech that was given by the great Frederick Douglass, who was once a slave and who became a brilliant and powerful leader of the anti-slavery movement. And it's in response to the 4th of July. He was asked to speak at the 4th of July celebrations in the United States in 1852. And this is a part of it. And I came across it last night, and I said, this is what I'm going to say. And he's talking as if he's an American slave, because he was a slave. And his answer to this is, what is your 4th of July to the United States? And this was his answer, part of it. 4th of July is a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice. When he says to him, I'm talking about the slave. A day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-founded impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgiving, with all your religious parades and solemnity, are to him, the slave, a mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. It is a thin veil to cover up crimes which disgrace the nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. And we can say that of the UK, can't we? I continue. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour forth a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not a gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The priority of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. The great Frederick Douglass, 1852.
Without further ado, I'm quite excited to introduce our next speakers. Polly and Patrick have come from Sheffield. They are school strikers, and we're excited to join them on the 20th of September.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Polly. Obviously, I'm a youth striker. The youth strike movement has played a crucial role in propelling the climate crisis into the forefront of the political agenda. But this is not a done deal. We cannot lose this momentum by becoming complacent. We cannot leave it there like so many politicians have told us that we should. We've got to harness this energy, this potential, this hope to grow and develop our movement and ultimately transform the world we live in into one which puts people first. The 20th of September, the general strike, is our opportunity to build on what we've already achieved by incorporating other organizations other than the Youth Climate Network into our movement in the fight for climate justice. This is a time for many who have praised the actions of the youth strikers to feel empowered to play their part. This is a time to prove what we are capable of. This is the time for the youth to take back their futures. I want to finish with one of my favorite slogans on the placards from the youth strikes, which really epitomizes how I feel about the future and where it's going. The seas are rising, but the youth are rising faster.
Hi, I'm Patrick. Wait, I'm just going to take the mic. Right. Hi, I'm Patrick. I'm a youth striker from Sheffield, and I'm heavily involved with the UK School Climate Network. I just want to say thank you to the SWP for holding this event. I feel like it's been a really positive event, and I've just loved it. But yeah, now I'm going to speak. The current state of the world is dire. We know this. Not only are we facing a rise of right populism and fascism across Europe and the world, not only are we facing attack after attack on the public sector that we fight so hard to keep, and not only are we in the midst of a housing crisis where working people are struggling to put roofs over their heads and food on their plates, but we are also facing the devastating effects of climate breakdown. The climate crisis is going to bring flooding, wildfires, extreme weather events, and a lack of resources, and in the process displace millions of people. It is quite easy to think about this and lose hope, to feel scared and angry, and over the last few years, I know many of us have. That's why the youth strikes are so important. We have taken that anger, that fear and worry about our futures, and turned it into a force for change. We have brought hope back. Now, the question is no longer can we stop climate change, it's how soon can we do it. For years, the mainstream ideas about climate change have dominated. They've told us that it's the fault of ordinary people, and that the only way to solve it was to lead an eco lifestyle in which you use a bag for life or cycle more. We now know that this is bullshit. No more will we let giant corporations try and pin the blame on us. We know who the real enemies are. They are the CEOs of the fossil fuel industries who collect trillions of dollars in government subsidies. They are the billionaire investors who own the top 100 companies and are responsible for 71% of carbon emissions. But now we are strong and we are organized and we are ready to fight them. But we cannot fight them on our own. Although the student strikes have been a fantastic display of radical consciousness, they are not enough. Our actions have been amazing in raising students' political understanding, but we must now move to build a genuine workers' movement. We understand that it is those who have the central role in production of wealth in this society who are the greatest factor for change. And so it should be them who are out on the streets with the students, standing in solidarity with us. That is why we are calling for a general strike for the climate on the 20th of September. A year ago, this was unimaginable, but the actions of students have changed that. Political struggle has raised our consciousness. The actions of the students have shown us the power that we all have. We must take the energy and momentum of these movements, and we must use them to push for real, radical system change. The 20th of September is just the start. Even if we only get 1 or 2 hour stoppages in most workplaces, we will then have the confidence to move forward, to build for the next strike, and the next strike, and the next, and the next, and the next, until we get the system change, not climate change. Almost 100 years ago, Rosa Luxemburg said, "We have a choice, socialism or barbarism," and that is as true today as it was then. If in the fight for the climate justice, we are not fighting for the rights of refugees, the rights of workers, and the rights of all oppressed people, then there is no point in fighting at all. So when they want to let climate refugees drown in the Mediterranean, we oppose them. When they want to cut wages and living standards, we oppose them. When they are destroying the planet for their own gain, we oppose them. So let us stand as the workers of today and the workers of tomorrow, and let's fight for a better, safer future for everybody.
Without further ado, I'd like to invite the editor of Socialist Worker, Charlie Kimber, to close our rally.
Can you all hear me? Yes. Lovely. Marxism has been a huge success. The pre-bookings were higher than last year. The number of people booking on the door here was higher than last year, and the headcount at meetings was much higher than last year. Huge success. That comes down to the hard work of lots of people, but I just want to mention a few. I want to thank all the staff of Queen Mary who have hosted us at this new venue. Perhaps some of those were a little surprised at what it actually looked like, but nonetheless, they've been fantastic for us, and we thank them for it. Thank you to Monica Axon for organising the creche, which is an important part of the event. Thank you especially for all the team members in the red T-shirts. Thanks to everybody who has helped out at the event, who's made it such a success, and who built it in the various parts of Britain and brought people down to it, and finally thanks to Lewis Nielsen, who presided over it. Thank you. And thanks to you, because it's your participation that makes this the vibrant event that it is, and thanks to all our speakers who took part, especially the ones who weren't members of the SWP and came along to take part in it. Marcia Rig began with that extraordinary speech by Frederick Douglass, and you cannot go wrong with a speech by Frederick Douglass, one of the greatest, most inspiring speakers. It sends a shiver down my spine whenever I read his speeches. Mine is a lower level to begin with, which is the Daily Mail, I'm afraid. Because occasionally it has moments in which it shows both the terror of the Conservatives and also their complete inability to actually understand what's going on. And there was a little editorial they wrote recently, headlined, "What a Gift to Corbyn." And it shows both their terror about any change to the established order, and also that they know that they keep demonstrating that the world is run by a tiny group of very nasty people. So I'll read it out to you. As part of his vision to transform Britain into a Marxist Arcadia, did you know he was going to do that? Mr. Corbyn would seize our water companies and return them to the people. To his hard-left acolytes, confiscating assets is an exhilarating act of class war. In fact, it is state-sponsored theft. But the Soviet-style rhetoric is harder to condemn when Southern Water is fined 126 million for pumping contaminated water into rivers, then covering up the scandal, adding insult to injury. The boss pocketed 700,000 a year, then upped sticks for another well-paid job. The company now faces a criminal investigation, and Mr. Corbyn has yet another hefty Marxist stick to beat those who sing the virtues of free market capitalism. So I bought my own Marxist stick, which will be manipulated later. So look forward to that. So look, the Conservatives are undoubtedly in a huge mess, aren't they? And their solution is either Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt. To what question could the right answer be Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt? The biggest waste man in Britain might be the answer to that. But they are an incredible difficulty. I mean, Johnson represents some of the nastiest aspects of the Tory party and some of the nastiest aspects of British politics. Racist, misogynistic, absolutely committed to showering more money on the very richest people in society. You might think they were standing in an election in which those doing the voting were racist, misogynistic, people who wanted to shower money on those at the top of society. But don't think that Jeremy Hunt is any nicer. I mean, we know that he wants to take away women's rights to abortion. But you may have missed this because you've been at Marxism. He made the most disgusting speech about anti-Semitism a few days ago, when he said this about a visit he made to the death camp at Auschwitz in 2006. When I went to Auschwitz, I said to myself, thank goodness we don't have to worry about that kind of thing happening in the UK. Now, that's an incredibly complacent thing to say. It was 2006, just before Nick Griffin was going to be elected as an MEP in the northwest of England. The British National Party, the Fascist Party, was on the rise at the time. So incredible complacency. He himself now says, actually, I was a bit complacent. I find myself now faced with the leader of the Labour Party who has opened the door to anti-Semitism in a way that is truly frightening. In other words, he was saying that what happened at Auschwitz is now what's happening inside the Labour Party in Britain. The most disgusting speech imaginable to say. And let me say again what I said when I was here with Chris Williamson earlier. If you want to find an institutionally racist party in Britain, it's called the Conservative Party, not the Labour Party. A party stuffed with Islamophobes that celebrates racists as its head and refuses to even admit the crimes it committed around the Windrush generation and many other of those who faced the brutal reality of Britain's migration system as well. And we should recognise that there's need for a very serious struggle over all the questions that are linked to the Tories. And that's why we'll be joining the protests or initiating protests on the 22nd of July, just before the announcement of the election result of the Tory party, in protest at the fact that that tiny electorate of bigots will be electing our Prime Minister. Not in our name. Not in our name. We will struggle against whoever is elected, and we will also be going to Manchester on the 29th of September for the demonstration at the Conservative Party conference to say that their troubles are not over and that we are going to take up all the issues which the Tories are associated with. We will be going there to remember those who have died because of the austerity cuts. We will be remembering the wrecked lives and the destruction caused by the attacks on the National Health Service and the Education Service. We will be going to say that we want the abolition of the universal credit regime, which is so pernicious and so cruel towards people. We will be saying that we remember the dead of Grenfell and their responsibility for those people who died. We will be going to continue the fight against racism and to be as part of the struggle against climate chaos, which our speakers spoke so effectively about. And we also want to make that demonstration, which I think can pull in numbers of trade unionists and campaigners and so on, a launch pad for more resistance and more struggle. It's great to have here people associated, directly involved with the Birmingham home care strike, with the Glasgow equal pay strike, with the Camden traffic warden strikes and other battles as well. But the truth is, there aren't nearly enough of them, and that's not the fault of ordinary workers. It's the fault of people higher up inside the trade union movement who are watching complacently while people's living standards and jobs are taken away, and they're not encouraging enough of a fight over it. And of course, the question of anti-racism is central to everything that we've done. Did you see earlier in Marxism the news that Tommy Robinson had lost another court case and faces up to 2 years in jail? I don't shed any tears for that verdict, but nor do I trust the British state to deal with the question of Tommy Robinson or fascism. The most cheering thing, the most effective thing, the most important thing was the campaign against Robinson in the northwest of England. That stopped him. Just to be sure that I wasn't overstating it, I read the report in the Manchester Evening News on how Robinson had reacted to it. And he said this: On every working class estate I went to, I have never felt so loved. It was the greatest love I have ever felt in my life. And then the next sentence, I was repeatedly asked, aren't you a Nazi? So presumably he felt the great love of being able to say, yes, I am a Nazi. But it's an incredible tribute, to the campaign, that all those people had got the message, this bloke's a fascist. And whether you will leave or remain or whatever you think about that Brexit argument, don't vote for this one. And very, very few people did. It's a fantastic tribute. But of course, there's a big challenge still, isn't there? The Brexit Party is a real threat. Not everyone who voted for the Brexit Party is a racist, let alone a fascist. But Nigel Farage is a racist, and he wants to create the sort of organisation that we see in Europe with Matteo Salvini and those sorts of foul people that are attacking refugees, attacking Roma people, attacking Muslims, attacking migrants. That's what he wants to create. Let's be clear about it. There was a rally he held in Birmingham recently. 5,000 people. It's a big rally. He comes on. Before he comes on, it's pitch dark. There's an air raid siren sounding. I mean, what's the symbolism of this? Everyone has a little glow stick to wave to recognise him. And then he must have said something like, are you for a no-deal Brexit? And there's 5,000 of them standing there like this in front of him. And it's quite a chilling picture, actually, of what they are hoping to create. And we have a big struggle against it, and it goes on. So we did with Robinson, Stand Up to Racism and UAF, and we did for UKIP at that election, but the battle goes on against racism. And we also know there are other aspects of racism. The state racism that Marcia has been fighting again for so long, and to keep the battle going is such an incredible achievement. And there are new cases all the time that we have to remember. There was a Muslim woman who was drowned recently called Shukri Abdi, which there are many, many questions about how the police have behaved about it. These cases continually re-emerge. And we also know that there is a massive threat from the forces of the far right in Europe and in places like Brazil. So this fight is going to go on. We're going to keep building Stand Up to Racism. We're going to keep fighting against the fascists and the far right. And the Stand Up to Racism conference on the 19th of October is a big focus that we want to make sure is the place where we can get huge numbers of anti-racists together to make that fight more effective. So please make sure you're coming along to that. But the thing I want to spend perhaps most time on is the question of climate change. Because, as it says on the poster, I hope down there somewhere on the front, this is an emergency. This is an emergency. And I was thinking about what we need to achieve the sort of transformation we want and the change in the level of campaigning around it. I think there are four things. The first is we need knowledge and to equip ourselves with the facts about climate change. Remember that for all the talk of renewables and change and global agreements, and governments have woken up to it and corporations are going green, 2018 was still the highest ever year of carbon emissions in history. The human body begins to shut down at 41 degrees centigrade. Today, in Khartoum in Sudan, it is 41 degrees centigrade. At 50 degrees centigrade, the cells of your body start to deteriorate and the risk of organ failure sets in. Today in Basra in Iraq, it is 50 degrees centigrade. That's the sort of reality that we have to know about. And all the predictions about the rise in carbon emissions have been correct. What's not been correct is that the effects seem to be even greater than those that were predicted. The second thing we need, I think, is theory. And therefore, the book that Nadia mentioned that people are reading about, System Change, Not Climate Change, the work that Ian Angus, who spoke here, or Martin Empson has done, many other people have worked on developing the theories around this, is incredibly important. And I think we need to think about how we equip ourselves with all of that. The third thing we need, and I say this very carefully, because it's normally not a good thing, is fear. I think in this case, fear is a positive emotion when faced with the climate catastrophe. You have to believe it. It's not just, yes, it's terrible, but is it really true? Is it really true we haven't got many years left to stop irreversible climate change? You have to feel it. And if you don't, here's one more statistic that I read this morning. Because of Bolsonaro's unleashing of the corporations in the Amazon rainforest, 769.1 square kilometers of rainforest were lost last month. That equates to an area of rainforest larger than 1.5 soccer fields being destroyed every minute of every day. The scale of what capitalism is doing to the planet is terrifying. And you have to get a bit frightened to think about what your lives and what their lives and the lives of future generation will be like. Not just here. Although note that last week, France had its hottest ever day on record. And just to add to it, the reaction of the French authorities was to stop 2 Muslim women going to a public pool in Grenoble because they weren't dressed properly. That's their way of responding to it. The hottest ever day in record. Think what it will be like in areas in sub-Saharan Africa and in Asia and in Latin America. Think about the areas that will actually become impossible to grow food, the places that will become actually uninhabitable about all of that. And I think the final thing you need is rage. Rage about a system which, in the pursuit of profit, threatens to destroy life upon this planet. Rage. Because if you are going to match up to what they've done, you have to be a bit frightened, you have to be knowledgeable, and you have to say, I am so angry, we are going to do something different to that which we normally do. What we normally do is we make demands on the trade union leaders, we pass a motion in our trade union branch, we hope we can have a consultative ballot, we then, if possible, we get the high enough turnout figure, obey the anti-union laws and try and get it in a formal postal ballot. And again, if we hit the 50% turnout and the 40% yes of those who are voting in it, then maybe we can have a strike. But honestly, that isn't good enough. The question for all of us is, can you match them? They did it. And reading history is useful. I love reading history. History also needs to be brought up to date and applied now. A few hundred metres from here, in 1888, the British trade union movement was exploded by a strike, a walkout, by the matchwomen. Teenagers, nearly all of them women, nearly all of them migrant workers or first-generation migrant workers. And they set off a whole train of resistance in Britain, which created the new unions. Wouldn't be a surprise, would it, in 2019, if a group of teenagers, many of them women, many of them migrants or first-generation migrants, set off the ability of the working class to be revived in Britain. So when we say, on the 20th of September, we want to see strikes, we want action, I'm getting out my Marxist stick. And I'm looking around the room, and I'm pointing at a few people and saying, it's not just a question of what we do, it's a question of what you do. Are you going to go back and argue for a strike, for action, for resistance, to transform the British working class from one that is quiescent into one that is going to give the biggest surprise ever to those at the top of the society? Are you going to do it? Yes. As they say in South Africa, can I have a more fire? Are you going to do it? Yes. Well, we'll keep you to that. And the film is running. So you have to try that, genuinely. Hold a meeting, talk to people. I know it's not simple. We've had years and years and years of our side not fighting. It's been a one-sided class war. Their side fights and ours doesn't. So we're going to fight over that, and this is a crucial part of it. I also want to say that we need a fight for socialism. And for many people will think that's the Labour Party. And of course we support Jeremy Corbyn against the right. We will vote for Labour when there's a general election. We want Corbyn in 10 Downing Street. But I was very, very aware that when Chris Williamson spoke here the other night, and a big thank you for him for coming to that, the truth is he's been abandoned by the left of the Labour Party. They've allowed him to be smeared in the most appalling way. When he said Labour has been too defensive over the question of anti-Semitism, he was 100% right. He was 100% right about that. And I'm sorry, a Labour Party that is retreating now over Trident nuclear weapons, over freedom of movement for workers, over the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, over Chris Williamson and other issues as well. If it's like this now, what will be like if they get into office? So it's not good enough to say that we're just going to vote inside the Labour Party. And we have to take our fight for an alternative to get the inspiration from somewhere else. I mean, what have been the great events of this year? Certainly Extinction Rebellion and the school climate strikes, undoubtedly that. But also the revolutionary movements in Algeria and Sudan, to see those hundreds of thousands of ordinary people sitting in outside the military headquarters in Khartoum and in Port Sudan and El Obeid and other parts. The great general strikes that broke the resistance of the regime. To see that is evidence that ordinary people can change themselves, can change society, particularly women at the front of those resistance movements, to show that ordinary people can create a different sort of life. And we're seeing resistance in Hong Kong, aren't we, as well? And we've seen it in Europe. The Gilets jaunes is a fantastic example of how new movements, quite unexpectedly, can arise inside society. There's two slogans from the Gilets jaunes movement, the Yellow Vest movement, that I really liked. One is "Coucou les riches." Coucou is a sort of word that means hi. It's obviously when you do that peekaboo thing with children. But it's also a bit of, when you play hide and seek, you go, I can see you. And it's really saying, the rich, we've seen you. We know who you are. You're the problem. You're the problem, not people like us. You people at the top of society are the problem. And the other slogan was a slight mangling of the Internationale, which you'll be singing later on, where someone had painted on pillars, on one of them, Nous sommes rien, we are nothing. And on the other, Nous voulons tout, we want everything. We're nothing. The internationally actually is, we will be everything. We will be everything. At the moment we're nothing, but we're going to take it all back from you, and we're going to have our own sort of society. And this is what we need to be lifted by, that we are not going to get the end of catastrophic climate change in a world run by billionaires. They're not going to do it. They are going to always put their corporate profits first. We're not going to get a solution to climate chaos when you have a world divided international boundaries with competing states. It's not going to work around that. And therefore we need to think about how we tear down the borders and tear down that system that produces it. We are not going to eliminate the roots of racism and women's oppression and homophobia and transphobia while we have the capitalist system in place. And what we've seen in Sudan and Algeria and the climate strikes is the potential to build a different sort of movement. But to do that, we have to organise. I'm glad to say, already at Marxism, more people have joined the Socialist Workers' Party than joined last year at the Marxism event. And I don't say that because it means, oh, that's tremendous, the SWP is bigger and all the rest of it, you know. I say it because the tasks are much, much greater than the activists and the socialists we have at the moment. If we are going to drive through the 20th of September, we need more people like you in the workplaces. If we're going to keep up the struggle against racism, stand up to racism involves lots of people outside the SWP, but the SWP is important as a participant inside it. If we're going to keep fighting for more resistance and more struggle against the Tories, we need more socialist activists. And if we're going to have a vision of a different sort of society, we need people who can be in every workplace, in every area, who can explain to the people around them what we mean by that and how we can achieve it. And therefore, at the end of a great Marxism, a Marxism which has seen the anti-Tory struggle, the anti-racist struggle, the struggle against oppression, and centrally, the push for a stronger struggle over the question of climate chaos, I'm asking you to make that possibility of a stronger socialist response in every area of life and to join the Socialist Workers' Party.